Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna have a little chat about some book series that I think are better than Crescent City. Now, I know the title of this video says read these instead of Crescent City, but I actually think that the recommendations in this video would be really great for people who haven't read Crescent City and are kind of like on the fence about starting a series that's so long and potentially disappointing, people who have tried Crescent City and were disappointed, and also people who love Crescent City and are actually looking for a series that feel similar. Because Crescent City, I feel like, is such a different series from some of the other books that Sarah J. Maas has written. I feel like both of her previous series are very much in that sort of high fantasy realm, and Crescent City is totally different. So if you're kind of scratching your head and wondering like, what can I pick up that feels like Crescent City, I've got recommendations for you, or books that also like don't feel like Crescent City but I think are maybe better. There's a lot of different things on this list. There's 6 different book series. All of them are finished, I believe, except for one, so also you can go in confidently knowing that these are completed. Almost all of them I have like read in completion in their entirety and can say with some confidence that they don't like jump the shark at any point. So without further ado, let's get into it. First up, I have the Kate Daniels series by Alona Andrews. So this is a 10-book series set in a world that is dominated by both magic and technology, and both are constantly at war with each other. And by that I mean magic basically comes up into society as like a big surge at different times of day, different times of the week. Sometimes magic stays for like days at a time, sometimes it's simply for a couple of hours. When magic is at its peak, technology is basically non-existent. We don't have working cars or working cell phones. You could be on the highway and your car could just basically break down because magic is up. And during these times when magic are up, we've got shifters, we've got a bunch of different like magical creatures and magical problems, and our heroine Kate Daniels basically helps whenever magic kind of goes awry and when bad things happen in regards to the magic. And then obviously adversely, whenever technology is up and like phones and cars and stuff are working, magic doesn't work. So society is a bit chaotic, and as a result I feel like the series has this sort of like darker and sort of like dystopian feel to it. I want to say that this series is set in like Atlanta, in like the Atlanta area, but again it has this sort of like gritty dystopian sort of paranormal urban fantasy vibe to it. I'm not doing a good job at describing it, but I would say it's like a little darker in my opinion tonally than something like Crescent City. But throughout the series, again, Kate deals with vampires, shifters, necromancers, a bunch of different kinds of creatures similar to Crescent City, and she also finds a very powerful mate throughout the series, and the relationship kind of grows over the course of this 10-book series. So you don't have a sort of like insta-love, insta-lust situation going on. Kate doesn't just like jump in bed with her mate. If you're someone who doesn't, again, like that insta-love, insta-lust thing, I think you'll be quite pleased with that. And again, I love the series because it is that cool mix of like magic with a little bit of dystopian, a little bit of a sci-fi feel, and I just love a slow burn. I just feel like Crescent City's relationship building between Bryce and Hunt really wasn't what I was expecting or really enjoying. It felt a little bit too insta-lust, but then there wasn't very much on-page smut, which I'm not a huge fan of. I don't think this is like the smuttiest series ever, but it does give you a little bit of payoff for sure. I also just think that this author-writing duo does a spectacular job with their world building. The one drawback I have to the first book in the series is that it does feel a little bit Crescent City in the sense that you're like thrown into this world and you're kind of scratching your head and like asking questions to yourself about like, wait, what's going on? And your questions are answered like pretty soon after a couple of chapters, but it can be a little bit jarring getting thrown in. But once you get past that, like, it's smooth sailing. It's so fun. And again, I just think the worlds that Alona Andrews create are very, very inventive. I just feel like I see a lot of Sarah J. Maas parallels with the series, but I think it's definitely one worth giving a try. Next up, we have another Alona Andrews series, and of all of the series on this list, this one is actually my personal favorite. It doesn't share as much in common with the Crescent City series, but I definitely think there are elements that would be very appealing if you do like Crescent City. So this series is broken up into 2 separate trilogies, if that makes sense. We've got the first trilogy that kind of covers the love story and or story arc of our heroine Nevada, and the second trilogy follows Catalina, who is Nevada's younger sister. This series is set in a sort of like magical world in a sense, but it's really just set in sort of like a post-magic or like post-modern, I guess, in a sense, Houston. I mean, that definitely appeals to me as someone who really enjoys Houston and is from Houston, but I think this series appealed to me more because it doesn't have the same, I would say, like gritty dystopian feeling that the Kate Daniels series has. So in this series, the government/military has sort of discovered a way to give soldiers certain powers to like fight against, obviously, like foreign powers. Over the years, this serum kind of gets out to the general public, and the richest amongst society basically has magical powers, and now they marry each other to strengthen their bloodlines and to get maybe new magical powers in the bloodline. So there are these different houses, and they have power, I guess, in society. They tend to be, again, very, very wealthy, hoard power and hoard resources, that kind of thing. And our heroine Nevada is a detective. That is sort of like the family business. She takes after both her grandmother and her mother, who kind of started the business in the first place. And at the start of the story, she is charged with, I guess, finding one of these primes, one of these like most powerful magic users, and bringing him to justice, I guess, like bringing him to the police, I guess the magical police in this particular circumstance. But this is a very dangerous endeavor, and she ends up getting caught up with some people that she wasn't anticipating getting caught up with. She finds her potential love interest, or her, I guess, definite love interest in this book. Shit gets really, really crazy. I think what I love about this series, and what I think you will love as well if you really like Sarah J. Maas's characters, is the sort of like, I was gonna say found family. There's not really a found family so much as Nevada is just really attached to her nuclear family. We've got her grandmother, we've got her mom, we've got her two sisters, we've got her cousins, and everyone really works together for the family business, and we really grow to care about the characters over the course of the 6 books that we spend with them. They all have a part to play in the family business, and also in keeping Nevada as like sane as possible. And I also think that the politics of the different houses is pretty fascinating as well if you liked the houses in Crescent City. Not the same thing at all, but definitely I liked the sort of like political maneuvers and the like power that certain people had over other people. I thought it was really interesting. These books are also getting new covers this year, I believe, to kind of appeal to a new audience, which I'm personally really here for. I feel like of all of the series I'm talking about, not only is this my favorite, but I also think this has this like universal appeal and could really appeal again to like younger people who are really in their romantic era. So very excited to see these get new covers. I feel like you gotta pick them up. I will, however, say if there's one thing that I would recommend with this series is do not pick up the audiobooks. The audiobook narrator specifically for the hero does a horrible country accent, and it really kind of turns me off personally. It may or may not turn you off, but I would just recommend steering clear if you can. All right, the next series is by Karen Marie Moaning, and it's been a hot second since I've read these books, so I'm not sure that they hold up like 1000%, but I remember devouring the first 5 books in the series and being so into the world. So our heroine in this book is named Mac, and at the beginning of the series, her sister dies. We think she might have been murdered, and Mac sees it as her duty to not necessarily avenge her sister's death, but to find out what happened to her. And her sister, I believe, was like studying abroad when she was ultimately killed, so Mac goes to Ireland, travels to Ireland, and decides she's going to figure out what happened. While she's there though, things kind of get a little messy when she discovers that she can actually see the Fae, and now that means that the Fae are kind of after her. So Mac is basically in constant danger and is aided, I guess, in protection a little bit by this like mysterious bookshop owner named Jericho who she comes across. He, I believe, can also see the Fae. And I feel like if you're someone who really gets a kick out of the world building or the lore of Crescent City, I think you would really enjoy this series. If you like answers that lie in like dusty books, shrouded in mystery, if you like sort of like prophetic elements, which I feel like are very present in all of Sarah J. Maas's series. You've got like dead ladies coming back to life and kind of telling you about your family history. If you like that kind of shit, I think you'd really like the series. I also think that Mac in some ways reminds me a bit of Selena. She's a little bit hot-headed and kind of thinks she's a badass, but she's irritating. But she does kind of grow on you. I think you would like her as a heroine. Also, I feel like Ireland is just a super fun setting to read about. The more I talk about these, the more I feel like I need to do a reread soon because these books are just so fun, and I love a good complete fantasy series. Like I've already said, all of the books on this list, almost all of the books on this list, are from complete series, which I really love. But yeah, there's something nice about 5 books. I feel like it's enough time to get invested, but not enough time to get bored. You know what I mean? Definitely a staple of the urban fantasy genre, and something I could just definitely see a Sarah J. Maas lover loving. All right, if you're listening to me talk and you are thinking to yourself, okay, Chandler, this is all great, these sound amazing, whatever, but none of them really sound like they're similar enough to Crescent City to get me excited, buckle the fuck up, because I've got a series that is so similar it'll knock your socks off, okay? The Guild Hunter series by Nalini Singh is a series that shares a lot of common elements with Crescent City. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I believe this is plagiarized or anything like that, but I'm not the only person to make the connection between this series and Crescent City. We'll leave it at that, okay? You've got a society in which angels sort of rule the roost. At the very top level, you have archangels over, I believe, like countries or continents, and they all are kind of a circle together. They sort of like govern the world, and they're just like the cream of the crop, right? Above humans, above vampires, above everything. And yes, we do have vampires. In this world, the vampires are subservient to the angels, and they actually have to petition the angels to be changed into vampires. They don't always get a choice in the matter, as in like they can apply to be a vampire and want it so bad, and then, you know, the angels can reject them. But if they do get changed into vampires, they have to, I guess, serve under the angels for a certain length of time. Certain things are required of them depending on like which angel they petition for becoming a vampire. But sometimes vampires don't like to listen to the rules that the angels lay out for them, and in this case they are hunted down by guild hunters, which I believe are pretty much always female vampire hunters. I'm not entirely sure, female humans. So our heroine Alona is obviously one of these guild hunters, and she's in charge of capturing and or killing vampires, and at the start of the book she is hired by an archangel to do this really impossible task, which gets her caught up in some shit and also kind of caught up in Raphael's allure. The first 3 books in the series follow Alona and Raphael, kind of their love story and their story arc, and then after that the books sort of alternate between Raphael and Alena's stories and then also books about the side characters. So Raphael has sort of like a cadre, sort of like a guy group similar to, you know, Cassian, Rhysand, Azrael, but like a little bit larger. He has this like cast of guys who kind of work for him. Some are vampires, some are other angels, and we get their love stories with their heroines, and I really like that they each get their individual book. Each book pretty much carries on with the greater plot of the series. There is always like world saving to do, there are always politics at play. My one word of caution, I will say though, with this first book is that the consent is a little bit iffy given the powers that the archangels have. They definitely can do a little bit of mind control, and Raphael is not used to being told no. He quickly learns though, don't worry. I think the series rocks for a lot of reasons though. Elena is a character that is super badass, but I think is also a little bit more emotionally complex and nuanced than someone like Bryce Quinlan. I feel like Elena's motivations make a lot of sense, and I really just enjoyed her complicated relationship with her family. I felt like it was a very relatable thing. Again, I also like that the side characters get their own books. And I like that there isn't one single, like, ridiculous battle scene. There are constantly, again, in every single book, like, wild things happening. There is a culmination of plot as the series kind of carries on. Yeah, you're not getting this, like, one blowout fight where, like, no one dies. So, and again, the series in general is just the most similar to Crescent City, not only on a world-building level, but also on, like, kind of a vibes level. All right, so the next 2 are ones that don't necessarily fit into the fantasy, paranormal, romance vibe, but I wanted to include them because I know that there are some of you that read Crescent City and were kind of disappointed with the vibe of the book. Like, you are more of a high fantasy reader, you want to feel fully immersed, you don't want to like have some sort of like postmodern Houston or some like random ass Fae city that also has like technology. Like, you're not into that, you want that high fantasy thing. Okay, both of these series kind of fit the bill and remind me a little bit more of some of her other works, okay? So the War of Lost Hearts series is one that I see talked about a fair amount online, but I wanted to include it here because I think it's very similar to the Throne of Glass series in a lot of different ways. The main character in this book, Tisana, is taken from her homeland and is enslaved, I believe, at the beginning of the book. Very similar to Selena in the first Throne of Glass book. She eventually buys her freedom, and she tries to seek out this magical order that she believes could potentially help her free her best friend and the other people that come from Tisana's particular country or land. But to join the order, she has to seek the help of a guy named Max, who is going to help train her up and become like an actual fighter for the cause. And when she is being trained, she learns a little bit more about the order and a little bit more about society at large that she didn't know before, and it gets her kind of second guessing everything. And I just think this book is super fun for the politics and also for Tisana's character. I think if you're someone who is often irritated by the like needlessly badass characters that Sarah J Maas does, I think you might really like Tisana. She is a character who has a softness, definitely a strength to her. Like, she knows what she wants and she's definitely going to do anything she can to go after it, but she also again has this softness to her that I just have never seen in a Sarah J Maas character. I'm not gonna lie. Like, maybe it'll exist at some point with Elaine, I'm not entirely sure, but in the meantime, you definitely have this book in this series. I will admit, I've only read the first book in this series, but I've heard that it gets better as you read, and I think that if you like Throne of Glass, I think this is a great series to pick up. All right, lastly, we have another Carissa Broadbent series, and when I'm thinking about it, I feel like this one is maybe the most dissimilar to Sarah J Maas's other series, though I am noticing some parallels the more that I think about it. If you are someone who enjoys Fae protagonists, but you're like more of a vampire girly like myself, I think this series might be one for you. So the main character, Araya, is the human daughter of a vampire king. He essentially adopts her and trains her up in the way of the vampires. Vampires in this society are these like ruthless kind of warriors, and there is this competition that is coming up where a lot of the vampire warriors of the great houses are going to compete for basically a wish from the, is it Goddess of Death? They are going to basically fight to the death in a Hunger Games style competition, and Araya is obviously not a vampire, so she has a bit of a disadvantage in this situation, but she's been trained up since birth, and she is determined that she's she's going to get to ask the goddess of death, I believe, for the gift of vampirism. I'm not entirely sure, I can't exactly remember, and I'm sure you'll find out if you decide to pick up this book. But in this competition, she ends up meeting this guy named Rain, who is one of the vampires from these great houses, a competing house definitely with the house that she comes from, the kind of royal house. And when she kind of befriends this guy, when they kind of form an alliance, she realizes that the society that she thought she knew is maybe not as great as she thought. She learns a lot about the world and maybe a lot about her dad that she didn't know, and I love that about this story. I think that's something Carissa Broadbent does a really good job with, is having characters who thought they knew the world that they lived in. They have to kind of face the truth as the series goes on. I think that's a really interesting way to kind of write a book. Different truths, definitely, in the different series. It's not like you're reading the same thing over and over again, but I really like that element of her books. I personally prefer this series over the War of Lost Heart series. I just personally really connected with Araya more. I do actually like the strong kind of badass characters without softness, so maybe that's why I like this series more. But honestly, I just really like vampires. I like the kind of Hunger Games style competition, and I know that people know about the series. It was nominated for a Goodreads Choice Award this year, but I do just generally think that it is incredibly underrated, and I think definitely worth a try. All right, so those are the 6 series recommendations I have for you instead of Crescent City. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was all in good fun. I totally understand if you are a Sarah J. Maas fan and you loved Crescent City. I personally am a Sarah J. Maas fan, but I'm excited hopefully to see her return to what I think she does best, which is these sort of like close, character-driven high fantasy stories, but we'll see what she does next. I'm always curious to see what Sarah does next. And again, I hope you found something new to read from this list. I love y'all so much. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time.